Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, comics fam, short and sweet here. We have a Patreon, so if you want to help us keep the lights on and spread the good word, you can drop a small tithe in the offering plate at Cryptid Creator Corner Pod over there. Membership starts at $1 per month, and we've got some great extra footage from the podcast dropping soon over there. Link in the show notes, and thank you for your continued support.
Thanks for your donation.
Do you love sci-fi? Are you a horror fan? Maybe you prefer action or fantasy. 2000 AD has it all and should be on your radar. With a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and many more, every weekly issue you get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and so many others. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive to your door every week. And your first issue is free, or subscribe digitally. Get free back issues and download DRM-free copies of every issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. That's like a whole graphic novel's worth. All subscribers get amazing offers like discount vouchers and exclusive product offers. Head to 2000ad.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app. And why wait? Start reading today. I'll put links in the show notes for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for our Comics Creator Chat. As we continue our 3rd annual Pride Month coverage on the show, it is my pleasure to introduce 2 returning guests on with me, comics writers Josh Trujillo and Jude Doyle. Josh is the scribe behind the hit DC relaunch of Blue Beetle following the adventures of Jaime Reyes, which you might be aware was adapted into a movie. He's also one of the creators of Aaron Fisher, Captain America, has worked on tons of other properties like Rick and Morty and Adventure Time, and in his spare time, he likes to dream about love stories between demons and pool boys at luxury resorts. Since Jude was last on, he brought home a GLAAD award for fantastic project we were discussing last time around, The Neighbors from Boom Studios. Got a new horror series from Boom hitting shelves this month called Be Not Afraid, and a new book dropping this fall with the most excellent title ever, DILF, which is not at all what you might think, but it's cleverly cheeky. Combined, they are the dynamic duo bringing you multiple stories in DC's 5th Pride special. On shelves now, Josh and Jude, welcome back to the show. It's so nice to see you.
Hi. It's nice to see you too. I should warn you that I did not win that award. I was nominated. I think Kieran
Oh,
Gillen won it.
did I say a one? I'm sorry. That was an error on my
No,
part. Okay.
but
Well,
it's lovely to be back, you know.
well, you deserve to win because it was great. Killen's
Oh,
Killen's great too, but that was a fantastic book. I love that book. Well, Josh, con season is in full swing. So, as someone that I know gets out and about, have you seen any Aaron Fisher cosplay yet this year?
Oh gosh, I do see, quite a bit sometimes. I was at, QCon, which is a local show we have here in West Hollywood, and there was an Aaron Fisher cosplayer, and I was walking in and getting set up, and I saw Aaron, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Aaron Fisher," and he's like, whatever." And then I was like, had to go through the grapevine, and I was like, "I don't think he knows who I am." And then he found out, he's like, "Oh, okay." The character downthroned me, I will say. But I it's nice to see the, overalls and the trash can shield and all that stuff, and he's been getting an upgrade in his look in the comics, so I'm always excited to see the new iterations of that every year.
Yeah, it's always wild when your characters just get legs and they grow and evolve, and they're out in the world, and that's a whole different thing. I think when you see somebody cosplaying, it just puts a different perspective and light on the whole thing.
Yeah, sometimes you see those, like, out of context panels, right? And you're like, "Wait, I wrote that, and now it's a meme?" Like, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. Well, to DC Pride, I picked up my copy already, and this is by far, in my mind, the best one yet. It's incredibly powerful storytelling that feels so poignant to this moment in time. But Jude, you're writing a superhero book now, and it's not all horror stories. What happened?
They reached out to me. Andrea Shea, who's very kind and very gracious, acted out of the generosity of her heart and invited me on board. And I was really thrilled and also really nervous to do it. Like, neither of these stories that I worked on are in a tone that I've, like, publicly worked on before.
Right.
So, I was really, really lucky to be in the room with a lot of people who are a lot better at it, ultimately.
Well, there's so much talent in the book all around. The writing duties are shared by both of you, Tim Sheridan, Vita Ayala, Maya Houston, and Sam Maggs. And Jenny Blake has a section at the end that's not related to the rest of the narrative continuum, but is equally as powerful following the autobiographical journey as a comics creator and their transitioning. And that narrative through line is what sets this project apart from all its predecessors. To give people kind of a snapshot of what's going on, Alan Scott is revisiting an old queer bar that's about to shut down with a trans vet named Ethan Rivera. And he's showing him a spot on the wall downstairs where he, in 1936, carved out a heart, which unknowingly precipitated a cosmic event that creates a series of pocket alternative realities, which pulls into its orbit a bunch of other DC heroes. So to start off with, y'all seem like a bit of a creative odd couple initially when considering it. So how did you both end up working together on this?
Gosh, what was I don't even remember the genesis of why we were paired, but I do believe that it was you are, getting sharpening your teeth, or whatever the phrase is on superhero books. And, I think they wanted kind of that collaboration, right?
Yeah.
I think that was a little bit of the element there. And, Ethan Rivera's story is so interesting, and I think in some ways personal. And so I think it was really great to collaborate with Jude on this story as well.
Yeah. We worked on, I think every writer in the book gets a page or two of Ethan, but we got to write his sort of backstory and his hero's quest. And it's something that I really love because we are just like literally in his head, watching him hash out his traumas while talking to like a giant pillar of evil flame that maybe wants to be his boyfriend. And I'm like, that's my
I can
comfort
relate
zone.
to that.
Yes. Like, I understand how to tell this part of the story. That's put him in a weird mirror world, and then we got to work with A.L. Kaplan on the art, who I haven't worked with since Ma, but my very first book was with A.L. Kaplan, and it was the best possible introduction because everything you put in front of him, it's so beautiful. So it was just like
Yeah.
writing weird things that you knew Alan would be able to draw that maybe nobody else could, you know?
Yeah, it was interesting
Yeah.
because, oh, sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I know a lot of the interstitial, the way we weave between stories is a lot of what Jude and I did. And so we're trying to kind of bring that coherency and that glue that really binds all these stories together, which is what Ethan is doing in the story as well.
Yeah, I mean, my normal expectation of a DC Pride special is a celebration without much continuity. So, what excited you both the most about that shift and change in formatting?
It was a massive challenge to get all these stories to work together. It was maybe the most rigorous editing process I've been through in my life. Um, but for me, again, as someone who's new to the format, it was such a relief to just be in a Zoom call with a whole bunch of queer people and be in a Discord and like have people throwing around back and forth ideas that like every story in this book is its own story, but it also touches onto and connects with and holds hands with everybody else's. So we just kind of had to move as like you've seen those schools of fish that can appear to be one fish. Like we're just like a fish guy, you know? Please cut out that part where I said fish guy. Or just keep it and loop it and be like, this is really sad.
No, we're totally a fish guy.
But
I can echo Jude's, sentiments. It really was the most rigorous editing process you could ever imagine on a superhero book like this, and, I've been very lucky in doing Blue Beetle. We're kind of in our own lane, we're in continuity, but we have our own city, right? We have our own little bubble.
Right.
And this story is all about bubbles, but we have to connect them all. And so it was little things like massaging language so we're not repeating phrases unintentionally or repeating story beats. Community is a big part of a lot of these queer pride stories, and that's no exception here. But we wanted to make sure that every story told a different facet of what that kind of meant. And it really took Andrea and Tim Sheridan to kind of like keep an eye on that and make sure we weren't repeating ourselves over and over again.
Yeah, I mean that sounds really really tough. I mean, in my read, I'm not going to lie, this book was completely unexpected. It was an emotional roller coaster for me. To get personal for a moment, my best friend is post-op female and an Army vet who did 2 four-year tours. My wife is a trauma psychologist in the VA and has willingly heard the worst events of people's lives every single day for the last 15 years. On both ends, the uncertainty right now that's created by the Trump administration through the chaos of Doge has turned all our lives upside down. And this is not to make this about me at all, but I felt like some personal context would be important to share with listeners so they can understand how deeply connected I got with this story. Will my friend continue to be able to get gender affirming care through the VA? Will my wife be able to still help people work through the horrors of these personal traumas? I was immediately invested in Ethan Rivera as a new DC character, and that is a magic trick to just suck people in like that and have them connect with the character so immediately. I don't know that everybody's gonna have the same experience as me, but I thought it was really, really powerful. So making him a vet, what else did you was that Tim who kind of came up with Ethan or how did that process work and kind of developing Ethan as a character?
I think midway through the writing of this, a woman that I actually knew and profiled for a magazine, Eliza Ray Shoup, died. She was a veteran. She was in a hospital somehow a few miles down the road from me without me knowing that she was in town. And she found out that her gender affirming care might be taken away. So she died by suicide right outside of the VA hospital in my hometown.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was a horrifying thing, and it's a dark thing to bring up on a podcast. But unrelatedly, I think Tim read the story and was like, "We need to speak to what these veterans are experiencing right now." So Ethan
Yeah,
wasn't a veteran before that moment, but he became one afterward. And I think just if I can talk about the story and not just like tell you horrible, traumatic things,
sure.
um, it's really Alan is also a veteran. Vlad, who is the pillar of flame that Ethan is talking to, is a veteran of his own army. That it's very, very common for characters in the Green Lantern universe to have that sort of background, and it helped Ethan sort of seem like a next generation version of Alan in a way that
Okay.
you could see the torch being handed between these two characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Alan Scott also functions as a queer elder, but he exemplifies that sense of loss as all the heroes, they escape being trapped in a world that they want versus the real world. And there's even some continuity in the statements made about the timing. 1936 was at the height of the Nazis, saying all homosexuality is wrong and, campaigns to eradicate homosexuality completely. So there's definitely some connecting points there too that I don't know. It just floored me. And I'm not trying to make I don't wanna make it overly serious because there's a lot of joy that is in this book too, but, that character and tying those 2 together was brilliant. It's just brilliant storytelling.
It worked so well, right? Because Alan really represents kind of that golden age hero, but we've added new context and new layers to Alan over the years, especially recently. And I love that, like, we're able to see really the evolution of the modern gay identity kind of through Alan Scott's point of view, right? Like, we're seeing queerness as it continues to grow and expand and communities build. And what Alan was doing in that gay bar in private, it is like a speakeasy, back in the 30s, is so much different than the kind of open community center it became in the present. And I love that kind of like there's the story of Alan is also the story of this bar.
Yeah, well, tell me about the bar and where that sort of came from the writers' team, because it does play a really a central role in kind of moving things through and creating a safe space for people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of paraphrasing something Tim said to me the other day, but it was a reflection of kind of the situation we're in. Um, I've been to more than a few gay bars final nights, and some of them have been around for as long as 50 years, but because of COVID, because of just business models, real estate raising, gentrification. They're erasing a lot of these spaces. For example, I live in Los Angeles. There are no lesbian bars here. It's one of the biggest
Really?
in the country. There's not a single one. The last one closed a few months ago. And so if you are a part of that community, there aren't any places for you. And so this is kind of what I think we're trying to capture is that moment we're in is like they're actually trying to erase us and they're trying to take our spaces too. What do we do? How do we find each other now?
Yeah, and I respected the commitment of this issue to not being a standard pride issue to it's so hard because when you're talking about, a really, really dark time for queer and especially trans people, one major function of superhero comics is that they create spaces for life and hope and joy and escape, places where you can sit and not have to think about your problem. But for a pride issue, it felt really important to have these characters live through some version of what we're all living right now, to face some kind of annihilating threat to their community, and to have multiple generations present who had maybe lived through these cycles of erasure and pushback and rebirth, before.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking back to my own experiences many, many, many moons ago. I worked in a gay bar called The Closet. And one night I'll never forget, there's a really close friend of ours who fell off kind of the collective group radar and had randomly enlisted in the army a few years prior to that. I was working in the bar. Someone came up from behind me, grabbed me on the ass, and then there was this characteristic, "How's it going, Bubba?" And I knew it could only be him. It was my friend, and he had a huge proud grin on his face, and he told me at that moment, "I'm gay." And my immediate response was, "Yeah, I know. We all do." And the change in his expression at that moment with what looked like this titanic just release, like his entire body softened. And that was so pivotal for him and for both of us because, I don't think he ever would have felt comfortable telling me without being in that place and in the random context of just running into me. And it made me happy to be a part of it, but sad that it took that long to get there for us as a friendship and that that separation happened over time. We're very close today, and it's really sad to hear that those spaces are just disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely like it's a tragedy in its own right. Because I know that like the kind of bars that I was going to, I lived in a very conservative pocket of Southern California. You think of SoCal as being kind of like a liberal bastion because it's California, but I assure
Sure.
you, that's not the case everywhere. And just the kind of the hole in the wall, the podunk bars, like those just don't exist anymore. I don't know. Thankfully, I guess we have the internet to communicate with each other and connect, but there is something lost in losing those physical spaces where you can feel safe.
Well, kind of the overall other thing that's connecting these things is trauma. Trauma as connective tissue is nothing new to you and your storytelling, Jude. I think the intersectionality of the stories in the collection when viewed as a whole is where it really shines. Take Ethan as a character as a trans Latin man or being a black lesbian in Sojourner's case, all displaying the challenges of living authentically in a hostile world but all things also sort of in balance. And Jude, you made me chuckle, which I did not anticipate. So, where was this version of Blue Snowman hiding in the recesses of your brain? Because this is the comic relief to the otherwise very serious nature of everything else that's kind of going on.
Yeah, I think that it just felt important. I think, you see this in the Midnight and Apollo story too, which is a little bit lighter, that I think many of us are at a breaking point, and it feels like that raw id of just like, I don't if one more cis person accidentally references Harry Potter or Dementors in a conversation, I'm gonna flip a table. I'm just gonna flip out. You like it Blue Snowman is written there's this beautiful Crystal Fraser story where, like, Wonder Woman helps them figure out that they're gender fluid by putting the lasso of truth on them, and, like, this is shortly after Blue Snowman has just done a very typical Blue Snowman thing, which, like, their powers could conceivably cure climate change, but their idea of a crime is, like, making someone's driveway icy so they'll slip on it. Like, they
Yeah.
do very low stakes things all the time. So they're like holding up a restaurant to ruin Wonder Woman's date to prove a point about gender. And Wonder Woman conclusively beats their ass and then enlightens them about like what gender is. And then they're like, okay, let's call this a draw. I'm going to go. Like, I love that that character is just somebody on Reddit, I think, said they had Team Rocket energy. And I think
Okay.
that's exactly it. That, like, if James isn't your favorite character on that show, you're just not watching the same show as everyone else. Like, they're a villain, but they have this completely unrepressed, impulsive, childlike id energy that I just like. I feel like Ethan is very noble and he suffers and he bears up under the burden of his suffering and his oppression. And there are a lot of trans people in this book that are noble. There's Coagula. There's a gorgeous Al Kaplan image of Coagula in
Oh
this that
yeah.
I wish it was a poster. It's so good. There's Coagula, there's Galaxy, there's Xanthaju shows up in a few iterations. There's Stitch. None of these trans people are the same trans person, but they're all faintly heroic. So I felt like as a trans person who's a mess, I wanted to just drop a trans person who's a mess into the book. And, community isn't necessarily monolithic and not everybody likes each other and not everybody is perfect all the time. And we don't need inspiration porn. We can have imperfect trans people in our comics and that's fine. So that it just felt like as a counterpoint to Ethan and his deeply noble trauma mining in the, demon flame zone. Just have somebody freeze somebody who's talking about Harry Potter. Just do it. Like
No, for what it's worth, Jude, my boyfriend devoured the entire issue in one sitting, and your story is the one that stood out to him the most with Blue Snowman. He is obsessed with Blue Snowman. He's like, "Where can I learn more?" And I'm like, "We're gonna figure that out. Don't you worry." But the thing I
yeah.
Blue Snowman is that what's the phrase? Support gay rights, but support gay wrongs. And I think it exemplifies that so well.
Yeah. I absolutely I can see where, it's a risky thing to just put like a trans person being a total brat in the middle of a pride issue because it's like, is this good representation? And you know, I have been harsh enough about stuff that I dislike that like anybody who wants to have a reaction to something I've written is welcome to have it. I'm definitely fair game. But I think that for whatever reason, it just it feels important to have a story about community contain friction within that community. That I think Blue Snowman's story is not ultimately about just like zapping people with an ice gun and assassinating members of Congress. It's also about just it ultimately comes down to one really heartwarming exchange that Tim wrote where like Blue Snowman holds Xanthi's hand and is able to have like an actual friendship with another trans person for the first time. And I think that's really beautiful, you know?
It is, and it is the perfect balance to the rest of the issue as well, to create those lighthearted moments that are critical, or because if you don't have them, you go absolutely insane. There was my favorite part of that was the Wonder Woman who she's just showing she's got this quizzical, like, "Are you gaslighting me now?" kind of thing going on. And in my opinion, this criticizing bit that you've got going on where you're basically calling in superhero comics that emphasize how the alt-right and media are weaponizing language, that is it felt fresh. It was like the first time I read Keith Giffen's Lobo in the '90s, and I was like, "Damn, this is what you need to do." I don't know who I need to call at DC to get you working on this book, but Blue Snowman is your spirit animal, and that's what you need to be working on in the future, so Josh, back me up here.
Oh, I totally agree. I'm doing Aquaman for DC Go this summer, and I already told Jude, but we're sneaking some Blue Snowman in there. I just had to do it.
That's
Yes.
awesome. That's very cool.
I love people in comics who historically don't matter. Like, I think that's the thing is that Blue Snowman has 5 fans who are incredibly passionate about Blue Snowman, and nobody else has ever heard of them, so I think just giving them 5 pages to be the most important person in the world, like, I always do that. I always get backed onto somebody that, like, nobody cares about, nobody will ever see again, but I wanna know that person's story. I want them to have their day in the sun, and I think that's what Blue Snowman both demands and deserves, you know?
It kind of goes back, at least it reminds me of when I was a kid and we'd buy like the trading card packs with all the superheroes in them. And you'd a Wolverine was like the big card you want, right? Or a super
Sure.
and you'd never get those in the packs. You'd end up with these kind of objectively C, D, E list villains or characters. And those are the ones I became obsessed with, right? Like those were the ones that I loved because those were the ones that were mine.
Yes. Like, my friend Zoe Tunnel just wrote this, a story for Marvel Pride, actually, and it has Despair in it, the, like, demon with the Molgoth name that has an apostrophe in it, and I just got so excited to see Despair because their power is making people sad, and they're just, like, the most emo, silly villain in the world, and I just, like I would 100% I want, like, a slice of life anime about, like, just despair, like, what does despair do for breakfast? What is despair? How do they go shopping? Like, there's room for a full exploration of despair's day-to-day life. I would read that. I would be the one guy that read that, but I still think we should make it for me.
I clearly think slice of life within the big two is something that obviously they're planning on developing a lot more of that stuff. You're seeing more and more and more of it. So there's an appetite for it. So Blue Snowman, DC editors, pay attention to this if you're listening. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Let's face it, the comics landscape is a mess right now. I'm the editor-in-chief of a comics journalism outlet, and I can't even keep track of it all. If you are as passionate as I am about indie comics and its creators, you should check out the Lantern Guide. Created on the premise of creating light in the dark, it's going to be the go-to resource to keep you up to date on the projects and the creators that you love. Don't take my word for it. I reached out to my friend Brian Lovell, Poison Ivy artist and indie comics creator, to get his take. Brian, what does the Lantern Project fix?
I'm a dude who loves indie comics, and I know personally, like, I get very frustrated when something shows up in my social media timeline or something like that, and I feel like I can't keep track of everything. So, really, the Lantern Project was born out of that. It was an opportunity for me as a reader to kind of like have a place to want to consolidate all the stuff that I wanted to read, all the cool projects from cool creators that seemed interesting and kind of unique to like something that I would like, which is really not super represented everywhere else, but it's all over the indies. Having a spot to go to that felt like it consolidated a lot of those audiences and a lot of those places where I couldn't just get drowned out in the feed of social media was seemed really valuable to me.
What's the ultimate goal?
It's really our hope with this project that creators feel like they're able to get in front of readers, and readers are able to get books that they actually want to read with a much easier time of keeping track of them and accessing them.
Catalog is scheduled for a quarterly release, so head over to thelanterncatalog.com to sign up now so you don't miss your next favorite thing. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin, strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person Fog of War capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even. Welcome back. Of course, working on a Pride anthology is a little bit like our story's heroes. This is not the real world, but the idealized sandbox that you get to play for a moment. And we've seen changes. I'll speak for myself anyway. There have been, I feel like, dramatic strides made with being able to tell authentic queer stories with the big two recently. You have Tim Sheridan, which is in here, and the Alan Scott and the Green Lantern run, Anthony Oliveira's Avengers Academy, Josh, your Hulking and Wiccan, Stephanie Phillips on Nubia. And now that I've subtly pitched people listening to a lot of the other episodes I have dropping this month, that's coming from my perspective. So, where is queer representation in comics to you both in 2025? Are we making progress?
I actually just I got to for my other job interview a whole bunch of queer comics creators, and it was heartening for me to see not only how much there is, above board in the big two, but how broad that field is. I think that we are heading towards a place where it's going to become increasingly risky and scary to publish any queer media and any trans media. I'm super heartened that DC and Marvel are not backing down and that they just made this one gayer. Just
Yeah.
make it even gayer. You know? But I think that there's just like this long, long history of queer people making art out of their circumstances, trans people making art out of their circumstances, and finding a way to have it read. If it's like a Kinko zine in the 90s, if it's just like on your Patreon today, there's always, always a market for it. And often, some of the biggest names come up out of those tiny places. That's what's making me happy is that like right now, I think that there are so many voices in so many places that they don't all have to sound the same or have the same message. And that's when you're starting to really be treated as a human being, and not just like a representative for your sexuality or for your gender or what have you, is when you're allowed to sound like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even 5 years ago, I feel like the field was a little bit narrow, the Rolodex was a little thin, and we're
Yeah.
getting these new voices added every month, basically in our long boxes, which is so exciting. And just like, when I first started doing comics, I was an intern at Dark Horse a million years ago, and there were no queer superhero characters. I think Hulking and Wiccan had just come out. And so that was revolutionary at the time. And since then we've gotten so many characters and so many folds and so many wrinkles kind of to that tapestry. It's really exciting. And so many queer people work behind the scenes and kind of as unsung heroes and allies like Andrea Shea. Uh, we have a lot of people in editorial. We have a lot of people in print production and marketing, et cetera, especially on the DC side. Um, it's nice to know that they kind of that we're not alone and that they have our backs, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, Jude, does the calculus change with respect to trans characters now that trans rights is fully in the crosshairs of America's cultural wars?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm like the one and only person to ask about how it goes for
Sure.
trans characters, but um I do think that it's increasingly fraught. And to be honest, representations of trans people have always been extremely fraught. It's hard even for trans people to get their names into consideration, and then once you do, you have to think about whether you're gonna be, like, the first or the only trans person in the room, whether you're gonna be the first or the only trans person the reader has encountered. The burdens of representation are really high, and I think that when you look at things like the increasing push towards censorship and, like, all, queer media, all trans media in specific being characterized as pornography, undeniably, like, something like Maya Kobabe and genderqueer, like, that's at the forefront of that. Right? It's one panel of somebody getting a blowjob, and that effectively went on to define the next, God, has it been 5 years of the creator's life? I mean, it's really brutal. But I think that, there's going to be increased scrutiny. I think also there's just increased resilience because trans people are used to being heard and they are used to building communities to uplift each other's voices. We are not in, like let's say 1996. There were about, there were trans books on the stands, but there were like very small, very local communities of trans writers working to get them on the stands. There was maybe like 5 trans books you would have heard of. Right now, we stand at the end of an explosion in independent publishing, an explosion in internet and social media, even though social media is increasingly becoming unusable as a space if you're like a marginalized person. Um, we stand at the end of this generations of kids who are allowed to come out earlier than we ever could, of kids who have gotten used to being heard more than we ever did, of kids who have seen themselves normalized and have been alive long enough to both see the trans tipping point and the seeming normalization of trans people and to get the backlash and to get really fucking mad about it. That I don't think that it will ever be possible to 100% suppress trans voices again. I think once something is in the bloodstream, it's just in there. You can't get it back out. Was I like on the barricades there? Was I Norma Raying you? I'm sorry.
No, you're great. I asked the question. I mean, I want a genuine answer, and that was a genuine answer. We don't have to sugarcoat this stuff. I I think it's important to have those dialogues and to have open dialogues about the real challenges. I mean, given the current administration, we see, and I guess this is part of what I've been thinking about a lot. You have these ups and downs. You had the Reagan administration and what it did, and then I'm not the biggest Biden fan in the world, but you certainly had it was a softer time. Let's put it that way. When you have Democrats in power, given the context of what's happening now with the Trump administration, do stories as creators working in the space, does it change your storytelling in 2025 now with what's going on? Or is it just the same fight that it's always been? I'm just curious how much those shifts really have to do with the stories that are being told.
Well, I think there's a new urgency to telling these stories in the mainstream format, right? Like I think independent, I mean, I'm like getting my zine materials back together, you know what I mean? I'm like ready, but at the same time I'm sending out more pitches and queer books than ever and hoping that we can get some stuff to the finish line because these companies are fundamentally owned by these mega corporations and we don't know what their whims are going to be. So
Right.
thankfully, we've had years of building up careers and networks, and I think, like you said, it's in the bloodstream. We're not going anywhere. We're gonna find a way to get our stories out no matter what. Um, but I do think we have, an opportunity and a responsibility to use our platforms as long as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm surprised how much honestly has come out recently with respect to queer history. Josh Washington's Gay General, absolutely fantastic book. I interviewed the creators behind the illustrated trans history book. It'll be on the show coming out later this month, and so it's happening. It's there, and I just feel like there's a lot of inertia now to get this out as it feels like the stories and the history of queer people is being targeted and, they're attempting to erase it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is that I think we go through cycles of erasure.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that the cyclical nature of these things will hold out. I don't want to be caught going in a circle around and around again, but I do want to believe that maybe this is a spiral and we're in a really bad curve. But the next time we have to face this, we'll have more freedom and it'll be harder to push us back, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we have to maintain our caution with optimism, right? Like, they both have to kind of be in check with each other, and it is you feel powerless, I think, a lot of times. I know especially the more vulnerable people in our community obviously get the worst of that, and, it's it's very frustrating to feel like we're at the end of kind of not a golden age, but of a happier, a more optimistic, a more co welcoming time. And I think we just need to kind of like shore up our strength and really try to maintain as long as for as much as we can for the people who are not able to do that, right? There's so many readers who look to our stories and our characters as kind of power fantasies and escapes and ways to see and give them new ways to see themselves. A lot of my work is for trying to find people ways so they can see themselves in popular fiction for the first time, including different groups and different types of people than ever before. And I think this DC Pride book does a really great job of that. I think we have so many diverse voices, both behind the scenes, but really on the page. I want to say this book has like 50 characters in it.
There are a lot.
And
There are a
most of them
lot.
didn't exist more than 10 years ago.
That's crazy to think about. It really is. And you said that statement, and now my head is running to when these things actually started coming out. And it really it seems like in the last decade, there's been a massive amount of inertia in a positive direction, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's I think you can speak to that more, but again, when I was talking to superhero artists and writers, just for my own little journalism thing that I do, that's what everybody said is that in the past decade, the inside of these companies has gotten significantly more diverse, and it's been a lot more common to hear from an acquiring editor who is themselves marginalized in some way. It's a lot more common to have someone behind the scenes rooting for you. And as a result, you can speak to your identity in ways that are specific, in ways that are explicit, in ways that are not a subtext or an allegory. You can just have someone who looks like you in a comic and they also happen to have superpowers, and that's okay. And that really, I think that well, DC has always been part of that. I mean, if you look at The Invisibles, if you look at Rachel Pollack's Doom Patrol run, this was happening in like the 80s and early 90s with
Yeah.
them. But now younger generations of queer people are coming up and are looking at that history and are trying to find ways to move it forward. And I think, that's what always happens. Somebody opens a door for you and then you get to walk through it and hopefully you open it. That's why I thought it was so important to just this is not Josh got to write the fun bubble zone part
Oh,
of
that was
Ethan's
so fun.
story.
Little
I was just, like, pitching terrible bubble ideas at him, but what I really just was, like, so urgent that Ethan had to, like if he's gonna be a new trans character in the DC universe, he has to, like, pass through Coagula's realm and receive her blessing, just get get sort of baptized into the tradition before he can move forward.
Yeah, and I think actually, just the little internet chatter I've seen, the book only came out a couple days ago, but Coagula's appearance and more importantly, Coagula's look, her fashion in that scene, I think people were really overjoyed to see Coagula really get a moment in the spotlight and be treated with the respect and gravitas that she deserves.
Yeah, she has that, like, Venus, de Milo almost thing, like, she appears in a sparkling cathedral. She's got, like, a very goddessy vibe going on, which is fun because in Doom Patrol, she's, like, hanging out in a tank top and jeans, but, like, I think Coagula deserves her Space Supreme Court, you know, inauguration to have, like, full-on goddessy robes, like, we need that.
Yeah, I would have done 50 pages of Coagula in space montage if I could.
Yeah, and good for
Well,
her
I
that
guess
she's
that
in space. Everyone else is down here. We gotta deal with, our stuff. I think Coagula deserves to just be in space and just, you know, come in every once in a while.
It's
But
nice
that's her dream that she's
they're
in
looking out
space.
for us, right?
Yeah.
and then Blue Snowman will show up and raise all kinds of hell. That's the deal. He's the comic relief,
Yeah,
of course.
they, I think, are yeah, well, Blue Snowman's gender fluid, there's probably a range of pronouns that applies at some point in their life. But, I think blue is just, like, to me, represents I know that when I first came out as trans, like, the baby trans year is, like, so messy because you're being so vulnerable in public, and you're also coming into the middle of a culture war, and, like, I, for one, got really messianic. I was like, I am the trans person that will solve this for everyone." Like, that I think that in significant parts of Snowman are a self-portrait, unfortunately. But, that Blue Snowman represents someone who's, like, just out as opposed to Coagula, who's, like, the elder and who can, like, confer upon you her blessing and initiate you into the community, and then Ethan plays that role for Blue Snowman a little later on, and so does Xanthe. That Blue Snowman is somebody who just sort of exploded out of the closet, doesn't know what to do, bought 50 stickers about it, but has never had a conversation with another trans person in real life, and needs to slowly accept that the world outside of their head can be as fulfilling as the one inside, which is hard for me. I, for one, would rather be at home. Having imaginary conversations with my enemies in which I'm always smarter than they are and I always get the upper hand. But That's not where activism is done, and that's not where change is made. You gotta go out there and make yourself vulnerable. Even if you are being vulnerable in, like, an 8-foot mech suit with a smiley face drawn on it, that's fine. That's your vulnerability. We should respect that.
But I think that's really the strength of this particular anthology is the peril and that peril creating the environment of vulnerability. And I think everybody who's involved, first of all, should be commended for the difficulty of you talked about, Jude, putting some of yourself in it. And I think that's inevitable. I'm writing a story, I'm of the disability community, and I feel the weight of the representational lens on something, and it just holds me back, and I'm like, "How is this gonna be perceived?" And it is a very vulnerable experience, and it's something I haven't really gotten into that much about how as writers, how much if you belong to a community, how much of yourself you really are putting out there, um, and how necessary that is to create an environment where I was talking to Anthony Oliveira about this last week, and it's something I've been preoccupied with. His assertion that straight writers tend to coddle queer characters and find a happy resolution for them too quickly, and not enough peril is created for them, so they don't have the same authenticity in terms of feel. Um, does that resonate?
Well, I think the best of intentions, from straight writers, cis writers, what have you, it just lags a little bit behind, what the community is feeling at the moment. And I think, there was a time for kind of those shiny, happy, perfect queer stories, those kind of like Will and Grace Glee era, as we're trying to build up this well of acceptance and, past normalcy, right? And now we just want messy queer people that reflect our lives. We want people with a pile of laundry in the corner of their bedroom that never seems to get out. We want that anger, and we want that 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 reality that we're facing every day.
Jude?
Yeah. I think that there's so many emotional reactions that you can have to this moment. Like, to be real, we pitched this in, I think it was January or February. And in that time, things have gotten just significantly darker than even I thought they were going to get. And I cover this stuff. Job. That rage is one legitimate reaction, and sorrow is one legitimate reaction. And regression and this concept that I've heard of that I now love called hypernormalization, where you just like shut everything out and try to go about your life as if it's normal as a way of just dissociating from the situation.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately legitimate. If you have to just pretend the world isn't happening in order to like raise your kids or walk your dogs, then that's what you got to do. And I think that what we're seeing in this particular book is really, to me, it's a really kind and deft way of dealing with that. Where like everybody is just retreating into their world that is livable for them. But as long as you're retreating from the moment, you're not engaging it, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced, is the old James Baldwin quote. And we're seeing people slowly emerge from their shock and their trauma and their denial into a dark moment and finding out that what happens when you open the door out of that dark moment is that you land with a bunch of other people who are going through the same thing and who have your back. And that's, I think, the message that Pride ultimately needs to, be about.
Trying to process all that. It's a lot. It's it's honestly tearing me up, and thank you for that because I've got friends who are doing that exact thing, and they feel guilty for shutting things down, and I can't have some of the conversations, it's like, "Hey, I can't say, 'Hey, have you seen what happened today?' Because
Yeah.
it will wreck their world completely."
Yeah.
And out of respect for them, I'm like, "No, I want to respect what you're going through. I need to talk about the birds that are outside or something and not, all the collective trauma that we're all sort of absorbing right now." So
Yeah, and I think we're all building hopefully, we're building those support networks where we can talk about the day-to-day horrors, but also I wanna know what dumb thing you're hyper fixating on right now that like, what were you doing on Wikipedia last night? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we
Yeah.
gotta we still gotta live, and we still gotta find joy and hope and community where we can.
Okay, Josh. So what was the dumb thing that distracted you on Wikipedia recently?
Oh, that's a good one. So I was looking cruise ships have godmothers. Every cruise ship has a woman or, who's designated as the godmother of the cruise. And so usually it's
Really?
a celebrity like Jennifer Hudson or Bette Midler or something. It's usually like a diva. And so I was just like going down this like list of like who's who's cruise ship for what. And then you go to like cruise ship like when they crash or whatever. And you're like, I wonder what it feels like to be the godmother of like a bad cruise ship. And so that's what I was doing.
I love that. There's a story in that for sure.
Oh, definitely. Just have to find an artist who wants to draw boats all day, every day.
That might be slightly challenging. Boats are as bad as horses, from what I've heard.
Yeah, horses and bicycles, I think, are the nightmare.
Yes, this is me. I'm like, again, as like the new person who's only done a couple comics, I got to have a call with Josh, and like the first thing he told me was like, never ever make your artist draw a bicycle or a motorcycle. And I looked at my script and I was like, there's a motorcycle in this. She must be so mad at me. And someone was like, well, we may need to make it clear that, this is contemporary. It's 2025. And I was like, put a rack of city bikes in there. Like I immediately broke that rule. But she was very gracious about it.
Good for you.
That's awesome. Well, before I let you go, let's talk about the other stuff that you've got cooking. Jude, that's DILF. Again, what a title. That was Did I Leave Feminism? It is not just like Dad, I'd like to fuck. So, dropping this fall, your third book, I believe. Tell me a little bit about that.
Third nonfiction book and first nonfiction book I've written under my own name as me. And the other two were very explicitly about gender politics, but I was kind of constrained by having to pretend to be another gender. So I found myself becoming sort of an object of fascination or confusion for people when I came out because it was like, well, how could you write those books if you're also a dude? And I felt like that's a question a lot of trans guys in particular ask. Like, what's my relationship to the patriarchy now? Am I an ally? Am I not involved in the conversation? What should I do and how do I do it? I can't give you those answers. What I can do is interview a bunch of trans people and try to like write about the places where trans theory and feminist theory have connected and disconnected. So it felt like, you know, it felt like a book I would have wanted to read when I was maybe just freshly out and I had no idea what I was doing. And
That's amazing.
that's hopefully what you wanna do for people.
Very cool. And then Be Not Afraid is coming out with Boom, and that's hitting shelves now, I think, right? Came out this past week?
Yeah, You're Not Afraid came out the same day as DC Pride. The first issue came out, and, that's with Lysandra Theron and a really astonishing team. It's pure horror. I think that I wanted to go as hard and as dark as I could. It's not explicitly queer, but it's about religious trauma, so, like, you guess if there's any queer subtext in there,
Yeah.
and it's I think, I've been getting really kind reviews for it, so hopefully people will not just pick up DC Pride and then pick up this and be like, "I have no idea who this writer is or what they're about." I don't know what the F you're doing. But, um, I've unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I have, like, every single thing that I can do as a writer is coming out basically in the same 3 months, so we'll see how it works,
That's
but
generally how it goes, though. You work for years, and then it all sort of happens at once. You're like, "How am I going to manage all this stuff?"
yeah.
Well, Josh, what have you got aside from Dreams of Tim Drake happening?
Raleigh, I know I've been launching my shadow campaign to write for Tim Drake, but
I'm here. I'm here for
me
it.
Uh, so I have a story in Young Men in Love, new romance that comes out. It came out this week in comic book shops. You can find it in, I think, traditional bookstores in a week or two. My story is with DJ Kirkland, and it's called Care. It's about kind of a fresh romance that's threatened by a bad medical diagnosis, I will say. And that's something that I pulled from people in my life, unfortunately, but I've been really inspired by kind of couples to stick together through hardship, whether it be, um, something like a medical issue, or whether it be, from an exterior threat that we're dealing with every day in our lives. And so that was really meaningful to do. I have a comic coming out from DC, Aquaman, Yo Ho, Hold On to Your Hooks. It's reimagining our Aquaman Jackson Hyde as a pirate. So you'll see a lot of characters reimagined as pirates. Um, Harley and Ivy, Blue Snowman, for example, and a lot of surprises. Um, my editor kept going, "Why this character?" And I said, "Gay." Every single time I So we're having a lot of
Nice.
that. I'm with Andrew Drulin, uh, Nikki Lalapi, who's a really talented Italian artist, and Bradley Clayton.
That's really cool. That series is kind of super gay because you have Stephanie who's doing her thing with Themyscira, and then you have Steve Orlando where he's on Shazam, I think, as well. Yeah, yeah, those look great. They all look like so much fun, and I love the pirate angle with Aquaman. It should have been explored a whole lot more before now, so
That
I
was
think it's gonna be
definitely
a lot
one
of
of
fun.
those ones where I pitched it. I'm like, "Has this been done before?" And so not really. No, it's so this is some fresh meat for us to dig into, and it's nice to have our own bubble, right? Where we're not threatened by whatever belt Sinestro's wearing that week. We can just tell the story we want to tell and use the characters we want to use, and it's been a delight so far.
That's awesome. Well, can you say if King Shark's gonna show up or not?
Oh my gosh, I will show you the King Shark design we have after this recording.
Yes! That's so cool. I'm a huge King Sharks fan, so that makes my day, that makes my day. Well, where would you like people to find you both online these days?
Oh gosh. You can find me on let's say Blue Sky. You can find me at Lost His Keys Man. I lost my keys, man. And you can find me on my website, which is just my name. And I post a lot of pictures of my dog on Instagram, so that might be a good place to go.
Yep, I'm
Jude?
also on Blue Sky for the most part. I'm Jude Doyle on Blue Sky, and I have a newsletter that's like jude-doyle.ghost.io. But if you Google Jude Doyle newsletter, that'll probably get you there faster than writing that down. So yeah, those are the two places at most often.
I will put links in the show notes for all of that. Jude, I love your newsletter. I don't know, there's something about the scathing nature of the way you approach life that just speaks to me. I really, really enjoy it.
It's hopefully self-scathing as well. Like I don't necessarily want to be terrifying to everyone but me. I should probably be like twice as terrifying to myself as I am to other people because that seems fair. But
Well, I always like to wrap up with a shout out. This can be gratitude towards someone who did something nice for you or something that just inspired you recently. Because I always like to end on a positive note. And I'll go first. And Josh, did you see this? I've been waiting
I
to
can't
show
quite see
you.
what that is. Is that a Blue Beetle page? What is
It's
that?
a Blue Beetle page. So I finally get to show the person who wrote this the original page that's on my wall. It's here for every single interview. I'm so happy to be able to
Oh,
do that.
what
So
issue? What issue is? I'm so sorry, I can't make it out on the screen.
truthfully, I don't think the I'm gonna be terrible here. The page number is not there,
Oh, it's the
but
Batman
I
Superman page. I can see it now. Right?
yeah, that's what spoke to me so much is you have Hi-Man, you have Batman and Superman, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." So,
I don't give the most detailed, descriptions when it comes to Batman and Superman, and I'm whenever I get to write them, right? Because every artist has those poses they know they wanna pull from, right? And so
yeah,
for this one, I remember I was like, "Batman and Superman fly down, you know the pose," and then Adrian immediately delivered.
that's so cool. He's
Uh
so talented, so talented.
And as for, shout outs and gratitude, I mean, I'm so grateful to the whole DC Pride team. Andrea Shea has really, been championing this book for the past 5 years, and, she was working on it on her honeymoon, I believe. So,
What?
that's real allyship right there, I will say. So my shout out is to Andrea and everyone at the DC team who does the marketing and the promos and everything to make our book really feel as special as it is to us.
yeah,
Dude?
absolutely. I have absolute gratitude in my heart for like everybody that let me into this thing and made me feel welcome. I knew that I was a new writer coming in, and it was just the most magical team of people. Tim Sheridan is like a baby angel. He's sent from above. He's wonderful. Um, and Audrey also is like, there's many baby angels. There, we don't have to compete. We can assign that title to everyone, including you, Josh. But um, my big shout out is that I got a DM from someone who's like, I don't know if you know this, but my name is also Jude, and I'm also a really big Snowman fan, big Blue Snowman fan, and I also put Coagula in an issue of DC Pride. So Jude DeLuca and I are now, like maybe considering that we might be in an Orphan Black situation, and I think that's gonna open up my world a lot. So that's exciting.
There's another
That
Josh
is
Trujillo. He's
cool.
not comics, but he's an award-winning photographer, and he's at Josh Trujillo, which is why I have my my awful handle. And so I'm joshtrujillo.com. So we get each other's emails all the time, and it's like, "Hey, Josh, come to Columbia and film this?" And I'm like, "I do, but I want to make it very clear thing about."
No, I get this. There's one other Byron O'Neill out there, and they are a lawyer in Texas. So I get some very strange emails at times.
I get Jude Doyle's obituary a lot because it's a common name for like 60-year-old Irish traffic cops, apparently. So I die like every other week, and it's really depressing for me. But then I'm reborn.
So do you get to read about yourself and all the wonderful things that people think about you?
Yeah, all the other Judes are doing good work. They all leave behind many grandchildren. They're much loved. I'm not making light of their deaths. I'm celebrating their lives. Um, but
All right.
uh,
Well, Josh and Jude, thanks for coming back on and letting me pick your brains about DC Pride 2025. It's on shelves now, and I genuinely hope they continue with this formatting because it's fantastic. And I haven't even mentioned the back matter, which is comprised of open submissions of selections about how DC stories have impacted people's queer identity, their journeys, their experiences. The whole thing is incredible. Make sure to pick it up. I'm so glad that they included that at the end. And thank you both for coming on and being so open and forthcoming and chatting today. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having us, and happy Pride.
Yes, thank
that's
you.
fine. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
This is Byron O'Neill on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.